Chapter 6 of History of Japan in Words of One Syllable. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Todd De Silva, London, Ontario. History of Japan in Words of One Syllable by Helen Ainslie Smith. Chapter 6. How Japan Fell Under Military Rule. For near 600 years from the time of Jingu, not much is known of what took place in this realm of the Far East. There is a long list of the Mikados who held the throne, with now and then a few notes of what they did with Korea and China. But in the course of that long time, we know that the faith of Buddha and some of the Chinese modes of rule got firm root in the land. Someone has said that these brought to an end the golden age of the Mikado's sway. Ere long, the emperor and his chief man of state took the new faith, and a vast change was wrought in the realm. For one thing, it broke up the long reigns that had been one great cause of strength of the throne, and in more ways than one it made the Mikado lose part of his hold on the folks, and led to a new sort of rule. In the 8th century, the court did a great deal to spread this faith. The men whose place it was to wait on the Mikado were full of zeal to do all that the creed calls for, and to be well learnt in the holy books of India. Word was sent that 2 great shrines and a tall church, which is known as a pagoda, 7 stories high, should be built in each fief of the realm. The ranks of the priests grew to great size, and there were scores of homes built for these men who had a wish to be monks, and for the rest of their lives to read the Buddhist books, and live for naught but their faith. The emperors and the empresses, too, thought much of how they might spread this new faith through their whole realm, and it soon came to be the way with the Mikados to leave the throne when they had held it for a few years and turn monks. They would shave their heads as a sign that they were to have no more to do with the world, and would take the name of Huu, which means the emperor monk of Buddha. The Mikado who took the place of Ojin had a long reign, but that of the next one was short, and so it went for a long time. When a Mikado held the throne for a year or so, he would leave it to his son, who might be but a year or 2 old, and this boy would do the same, so that the realm was in the hands of the chief monks, the men of state of the court, and not in the sway of the throne at all. Of course, this was bad for the rule, and for the folks who could not look up to their Mikado, as those of old had done to the brave men at arms, and the kings of firm will and wise minds, strong frames and good health, who had led their troops in great wars, and had the good and the growth of all parts of their realm at heart. But while the race on the throne grew weak, the class that bore arms, which, as we know, was made to have a good deal of sway in the days of the first Mikados, grew more strong, and at last they made a great change in the form of rule in the Japanese Empire. From the time that Jingu's war had let the flood of life come in from the west, more than one change had crept in, which in a still way brought forth a new state of things in the whole land in the course of time. But the 2 things that did more than aught else to mold the life of the Japanese into what the rest of the world found it less than a score of years ago were Buddhism and feudalism. The new faith, which came first, led a large part of folks to give up their old gods or look at them in new light. to change in part their aims in life, their ways, and even their food. And more than this, its priests brought to the realm the germs of new arts, and taught the folks to read, write, and speak the tongue of China, and made known to them not a few new kinds of work, which the quick minds of the Japanese soon made their own, and wrought out with such skill as it's seen in no place else. The work of Buddhism was to mold the minds and the ways of folks. That of feudalism was to put the realm in the rule of the shoguns, and to cut it up into fiefs, in each of which a daimyo, or chief, held sway like a king. His life was spent to gain lands and win in wars. His home was a vast fort, in the chief town of the fief, with stout walls, through which no strange man could go till he had shown he had a right to, and his household was like a small town of men-at-arms, who kept guard for their lord in peace and fought for him in war. In this the Middle Ages of Japan were like those of Europe, in both of which feudalism rose at the same time, through when it came to an end in the 15th century. In Europe, it was just on the rise to its height in Japan, where it was brought to a more high state than in any land of the East. For a long time ere this class rose to any great strength, the realm was for the most part in the hands of some lords of high rank, who did not bear arms. From them the knights of the field made up their minds to get the reins of rule. These were the Kugi, or court lords, of the proud Fujiwara stock, the first great race in Japan, which was not of the Mikado's house. They said they came from Ami, who served the grandsire of Jimmu. The first great lord of this house, by some means, rose with the folks at court, till he came to be Huambaku, or regent, for one of the young Mikados, and to take this post, which was the most high that any subject could hold, came to be the right of his race. From this house sprung the chief lords of the realm. At first they held chief rank in arms as well as at court, but ere long they grew so fond of ease that they left the fame and spoils of war to be won by those who would fight for them, while they gave themselves up to life at court, where they had full sway and rank next to the Mikado's own house. They made themselves a bar to cut the Mikado off from the mass of his folks, at a time when on the gulf grew to be still more wide, till at last he was like a man that did not dwell in the same realm with them at all. He was not seen by any one but his wife, the folks of his own house, and a few of his most high men of state. He sat on a throne of mats, with a screen in front of him, and his feet did not touch the earth at any time. And when he rode out, he was shut in from the view of the folks of the street. Thus, while his sway with the folks grew weak, that of the Fujiwara grew strong, till at last these lords got a great deal of the rule of the realm in their own hands. They put themselves in the chief posts of trust and strength, and ere long did with the empire as they chose, and made use of the young Mikados, who were mere boys, as tools to do their will. The throne lost its rights so far that when a Mikado had a wish to have any real sway in his realm, he would find he could gain it more as a monk than as the emperor on the throne. But for the most part the rule was in the hands of his proud race, till the Taira took it from them by might at arms. For 1,000 years, from the time of brave Queen Jinju till the great home war of the 12th century, the worst in all her history. The tale of Japan is made up of less of the deeds of the Mikados, or of the realm in his hands, than of the feuds and fights of these lords and their kinsmen, who were high-born, rich, and some of them of grand and brave deeds. For the class that bore the arms of the empire and fought her wars did not long let the Kugi class have the best of things at home. So much the more could they fight their own wars. The emperors themselves were not all good men. One whose name was Buretsu, and who had quite a long reign for those times in the last of the 5th century, and the first of the next, is said to have been hard and fond of coarse sports, like the Roman Emperor Nero. He would make his folks go up trees that he might fire on them and kill them. And he thought it great sport to catch folks and kill them when they did not know he was near. In the time of Baidatsu, who took the throne near 80 years after the time of the Japanese Nero, quite a bad war was led on the Buddhists by a man whose name was Moriya. He tore down the holy things from their shrines, and burnt not a few of the shrines. But the strife was put down in the reign of the next Mikado, and Moriya was slain. But peace was still far off, for the ranks of the men-at-arms were large and strong in these days, and war was their joy, as well as their work in life. If they did not have it at home, they made it somewhere else. In the reign of Tenshi, near 100 years from the Moriya's war, a great host in a large fleet went to Korea, where they made the king leave his throne and the folks own the Mikado of Japan as their chief. But they did not meet with as good luck as this, when, in the same reign, they went to China. Thus the tale of the realm of the Isles goes on till the great war of the 12th century, when the Buki, or knights-at-arms, of the house of He, or Taira, and the house of Gen, or Minamoto, fell out in a great strife and brought on the worst home war Japan has known. It was the Taira clan, led by Kiyomori, who won in this war, and he was the first shogun, or general, as we would say, who got the might of the throne out of the hands of the Mikado, or his regent of Fujiwara blood, and made that great change in the form of rule by which ere long the emperor came to stand at the head of the realm in naught but name, and as the chief of all priests and monks in the faith, while some chief-at-arms in the post of the great shogun was at the head of state, as well as all the troops, and had charge of the realm in peace as much as in war. The great strife and the change of rule that marks this time as one of much note in the past of Japan came to pass in this way. As the Mikado's sway had grown weak, and the Hyugi and the Buki had grown more strong, each came to have a great deal of ill will for the other, and each had a wish to be first in the realm and to get the Mikado in its own hands. And this ill will grew and grew till at last it broke out in a great feud and threw all the realm into dread and strife. As long as the Gen and Taira kept to war, the Fujiwara had naught to dread from them, and saw them grow great in their fame with no fear. But there were times of peace now, and when the bold, brave generals had time to see how the men who ruled the realm they fought for took their ease and dwelt in the wealth and peace. They had no such good things, but it was not long ere they made up their minds that they would like them as much as the Fujiwara. So they went to live at Kyoto, the chief town of the realm and the place where the court was held, and where all the great and rich lords dwelt. At the same time, the Kugi saw that if they did not take care, the fame these chiefs won in the wars would raise them too high in the state. Now the court, which had no might at arms itself, was most glad to have these chiefs put an end to these brawls when they rose. But the court lords did not like it at all when there came to be signs that the Buki would be as great as they. Their first step to check this was to make a rule that the court should not give high rank to any Taira or Gen, let his claims be what they might. Then they sent word that the bands of self-made men-at-arms, which had spread through a large part of the realm in the past few years, must not join the ranks of the shoguns. But this did not do much good, for the men did as they chose, and they did not choose to leave chiefs who paid them so well, and of whom they had grown so fond. They then tried to set one clan to check the other, and that, too, did not work well. But if they could not make any one else serve mean tricks on those great shoguns, they did it themselves. When the Gen clan brought all the north of the Hondu into the empire, and for most a score of years kept the whole of the Kuanto in peace, and went so far as to pay costs that the realm should have borne from their own funds, they made the court take no note of it all. And when the chiefs asked for some gifts or pay for the men in the ranks who had fought for all of this, the Kugi sent no word back at all, and would not so much as let the Mikado own that they had done in his name, but spoke of the whole thing as some feuds of their own. So the Gen and the Taira chiefs took it on themselves to give grants of land to their men, and thus most of the men-at-arms grew to feel still more bound to their shoguns, and to think less of the court. Step by step, the Gen clan, which was the more strong of the two, got hold of some of the posts of note in the rule of the state, and all might have still gone well if these two great clans could have kept on good terms. But the house of Gen could not bear to see the men of Taira raise in fame, and the Taira, just as bad, felt a pang each time they saw a Gen gain a jot in name, or rank, or wealth. At last a cause was found to bring them to strife, which was the claims of two princes to the throne. It was clear that the side which won and made its prince, the Mikado, would hold first rank in his realm, and they fought in a long, hard strife for the prize. The chief who led the side that won at last was Kiyomori of the Taira race. He was a young man who had been full of fire and life, and thirst for fame from the time he was a small boy. He had been bred to arms, and ere he was a score of years old, he had made a cruise of much note to get hold of some sea thieves that had done a great deal to vex the Japanese. Part of his life was spent at Kyoto, and part in the field of war at the south, so he knew the ways of town and court, as well as of war. When the time came for him to take the place of his sire as one of the chief men of state, it was the same year that the two princes laid claim to the throne, and the house of Taira looked sides with the Kiyomori, while his foe had the aid of the Gen or Minamoto clan. It was in a way like England's War of the Roses. The Taira, with their red flags, and the Gen with their white, fought hard, each for its own prince. The Taira won, for they got the house of the emperor out of hands of all the rest, and their prince was put on the throne. And from then till now, no one in the realm has had so much sway as the head of the set on the side of the Mikado. Kiyomori now had the rule of all Japan in his own grasp, for the Mikado knew it was through him that he had the throne, so he gave him his way in all things, as he could not get help but do. Kiyomori let no chance go by to raise himself and his house, and at last he held a place in the realm at the head of all the rest of the great men of state, and the sons of his race were in most of the best posts, both at court and in arms, and he too kept his place in the guard at arms. This is how the house of Taira came to be the most strong in the realm, and more strong than the Fujiwara had been. This is how, too, that the shoguns and the rest of the class that in times past had no place but on the field of war, now came to have the whole of the realm in their hands. It was the first of what is known as the military rule, which brought great change to Japan, and was kept up for 700 years, for it fell but a score of years ago. Kiyomori was at the head of all Japanese troops, and ere long he was in all but name the emperor of the realm. He had rid himself of all his foes in court and out of it. He and 80 of his kinsmen held most of the high posts in the realm. They had great wealth, for the tax of more than 30 fiefs went to them. They built grand homes in Kyoto and elsewhere, and at last he made 2 of his sons shoguns of first rank, and his girl child the wife of the boy Mikado then on the throne. The Fujiwara had no might at arms, and were, by the rise of the Taira, put in the shade for all time, and Kiyomori did not rest till he had, as he thought, got all the genfolks out of his way, so that through a long line the race of the Taira might be the chiefs of the great empire of the rising sun. But his wish did not come to pass. End of chapter 6.